The purpose of this screen recording is to discuss file sizes, DPI, how to save as, and some of those channels. Some of this I'm discussing in your classrooms, but this will be a more conclusive tutorial regarding the setup. So depending on what project you're actually working on, and if you look at the specs will tell you what size you should be in or what DPI you should be in. So when you go to Photoshop and you open it, you'll see File New. And you can actually set your defaults in pretty quickly and decide how you would like to create your width to your height. Make sure you are in inches. You can even rename your projects here, and most of your files will be sav underscore 2020 30 for the spring underscore found underscore draw 250 or 206 if you're on storyboard underscore, and you have your last name, first name, dot title. So whatever that's going to be, sometimes it's kind of nice to have that somewhere on a post-it note so you can grab it pretty quick. You can change your orientation to landscape or portrait. I will accept anything from 300 to 350. Sometimes it'll even say you can set it up at 120, and that's totally fine. And as you set that file up, that's where you would simply do that. Dots per square inch is dealing with how many dots are actually in an inch of your picture. So for example, let's open up and take a picture that I was working on earlier for one of the drawing 50-50 mimic exercises. And in the mimic exercise, let's just open that up. You'll see that I've actually kind of removed this little section and I'm trying to recreate it over some time, and that's part of the first exercise. As I imported anything, it gives me this little icon, and quite frankly, that is a smart object, and what it needs to be is a raster file if I want to be able to click on it and work with it. So we will right click and rasterize layer, and then you see that picture go away, and now these are actually pixels which I can move around, paint on top of, and work with. But as I zoom in, you're going to start to see little tiny grids. Those are those pixels, and each one actually is data, and data has information, information has storage, and that can accumulate over a larger file size. Down here on the bottom left, you can see I'm at 3200%, and it gives me my size here, my pixels per square inch, and as I zoom out you can see that that number is starting to change until I get to about 100%. If you're 100% on the screen and your picture looks really small, then it might be not worth pursuing. You might have to change the picture. At 100% it should be about this. It should definitely be not smaller than your screen size, but sometimes we like to zoom in and we want to be able to still work within the picture. As I'm working with this, because I have more than one layer, this is actually a Photoshop layer and or Photoshop file. These are like clear panes of glass. I've said this before and I'll just always repeat it in case we miss it, but we can hide those, we can show those, we can lock those. You have some different tools up here in those menus. You have all kinds of menus and submenus. The biggest thing is to hold on to it. It'll tell you what it's doing if you just kind of hover for a little bit. And if you don't know what something does, you can always check in the Learn Photoshop, do a search, or even Google. You're going to find that there's all kinds of bells and whistles. And with drawing with Photoshop, we're really trying to access some of the basics. And as you work from there, get really comfortable and then move yourself up. So if I was going to save this and I wanted to work on it a little later, I can do a file save as, and I'm going to save it to my computer. I recommend that you make sure you're in good control of your own storage. I do have that file name in there. I'm going to stick it on the desktop for now, and I want to make sure that layers is checked in Photoshop is clear, because if I don't, then that file will not be able to be used as layers later. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you save it as a JPG, file save as, and you don't have layers and you don't have Photoshop, and instead you go to JPEG, notice that it takes the layers out. And what that does is it kind of glues everything down. So if I open up the JPEG now into Photoshop as its own file, number 2, you're going to see that, uh-oh, that's glued down. And once you glue something, you know it's kind of hard to get back. And that's the whole point of trying to work with layers. Now, if you wanted to save this as a PDF file for your clients, you would do File, Save As, Save on your computer, and you would just simply select Photoshop PDF. Some people like to keep the layer, some people don't, and you have that privilege to work within those means as you're navigating through your clients and what they want and how they want to work with you. I am checking the box for high quality print, save PDF. So now I've actually got three files. I have a PDF, I have Photoshop, I have a JPEG. Why are these helpful? This is the Photoshop I can edit. The PDF I could send to the client, and the JPEG I can use online or for quick viewing or submission of grade on Blackboard. Let me show you how to downsize if you were actually going to change this resolution. So I open up the JPEG again and I go to edit image size, and instead of 350 I decide to go to 120, but I keep my aspect ratio the same. And now you're going to see that at 33% and at 100% this is a little more appropriate. While we're in this mode, I'm just going to quickly cover the crop tool, and the crop tool allows you to click and drag and create the area. Now remember that once you do that and you go to image size, you're going to see that that scale has changed. So be careful if your client asked you for a specific size at a specific ratio, because now you could see that I'm no longer an 8 by 10 at 300, but now I'm a 5 by 8.5 by 120. That is a very downgraded file compared to the 350 or the 300 Photoshop files. So that's why we want to maintain those Photoshop files in case something goes wrong. Now, if you try to make this bigger, there's a good chance that you could kind of mess up the resolution just a little, because Photoshop doesn't like to always go bigger. It's telling you that that is the most comfortable size if you're going to go to 120. So if we go here and we keep the 120, you're going to see that happen, and we've already cropped it to that scale. I do like the crop tool because sometimes you want a background maybe. Sometimes these are kind of pleasant to just kind of bump out a little bit from the corners, and you'll see that those settings will be there, and you hit enter and you've got a nice little frame around your object. Because it's a web file now, I'm going to do File, Save As, and when I say web file, I'm referring to the fact that it's a 120 DPI now, if you recall. So at the end of this file, instead of just leaving it as title, I might actually call it web, or you can even choose ping file. And if you do a ping file, just know that that is a more appropriate size for the internet as it starts to bring things in. So let's take a look at those file sizes. Underneath the desktop, I've got 4 files now. They're all the same. I have the JPEG, the PDF, the ping file, and the Photoshop file. Notice the file size is 35 megabytes for the Photoshop file. The PDF is smaller, but it's the same size. The JPEG is the same size, but it's also smaller because it's been flattened and it has no layers, whereas the ping file is super duper tiny. And that's the one that really uploads pretty quickly for some things. That is the difference between Photoshop, PDF, ping, and JPEG. You want to keep all of those in a nice little location that you can get to. So if this was your working file, and let's say this was the Mimic file, we know that's our first exercise, so you can even just put Mimic, grab your documents, throw them into the folder, and now you know it's fairly organized for you to be ready to either submit, receive feedback, or edit, or send to a client.